Hello and welcome to another episode of the Breakthrough Work Podcast. I'm your host, Ravi Kumar, partner and national market leader at Connor Group. Breakthrough Work is where we talk with leaders who have helped companies scale, transform industries, and break through pivotal moments in their careers. Today, I'm joined by Will Billings, Chief Accounting Officer and Treasurer at Chewy. Will has had a dynamic career journey, starting in Big Four audit at EY prior to shifting into industry in the oilfield services sector, which then paved the way for him to work for world-class brands like GE, Airbnb, Global Foundries, and now he's helping to scale one of the most recognizable consumer brands in e-commerce at Chewy. Along the way, he's navigated multiple industries, international moves, executive leadership roles, and even public company board service, all while continuing to grow professionally, including obtaining his MBA mid-career. Will, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ravi. That sounds like it only took about a minute, but it was a journey. It's been a journey.
I had to pick my favorites. You've done so much, so I had to narrow it down to the hot points.
No, I appreciate that.
Well, we'll launch into it. You started your career at EY and spent almost a decade there. I know we've talked a little bit about our experiences at EY and an audit and how it's different from what exists in the world today. What are some of the most important lessons from those early years, and how did that shape how you operate today?
Yeah, it's one of those foundational things. When you go into the Big Four at the time, you learn so many things. There are probably three key takeaways for me. The first is rigor. So when you think about rigor, it's structurally how to pressure test assumptions, how to build discipline in almost everything you do. And then the second is teamwork. Now, I'm the last of four kids, so I was born into a team. So collaboration is a natural aspect. But when you go into the corporate world, this was my real first job, effectively. And having to work within an audit team, it was more like a sport. You understand that my work leads to the next person's work, and it all comes together. So that collaboration and shared accountability, that was something that I took away. And the last is adaptability. Now, most people think the adaptability takes you from one industry to another industry, but mine was slightly different. On my first audit engagement, and this didn't change very much, the balance sheet didn't balance. So I walked into this thing thinking, well, at university, they taught me balance sheets balanced, but all of my clients had challenges. The balance sheet didn't balance, this didn't reconcile. And so when you start thinking about this adaptability, it's you expected one thing, you got a different outcome. Well, how do you respond to that? What are you going to do with that? And so those are the three foundational layers that I took from audit: rigor, teamwork, adaptability. They still reside with me today. And I don't think I'll ever get rid of those.
Well, yeah, and we talked about it. When we were still in audit, we had, critical thinking, problem solving. It wasn't just, compliance oriented like, the industry is kind of pivoted to now. Exactly. I don't think I knew you were the youngest of four. I mean, as a father of four, I appreciate, where you are in the lineup. My nickname for my fourth is the mayor, just because, he walks around glad handing, shaking hands, kissing babies everywhere he goes. So I see that a little bit of that in how you operate.
Right. We're all the same.
Yeah. So the stigma sometimes when you talk to folks that have been in audit for, over a decade, I only lasted 3.5 years. So you got me by 6.5 years there, is that you sometimes get pigeonholed either, on the audit partner path, or you're, a career controller or, middle management. How would you respond, to that stigma, and how did you ensure that didn't happen to you?
Yeah, that's an observation that I think probably still sets scale today. It probably still resonates today. And so from my perspective, while I was in audit, I always thought about getting to the top of the mountain. So you can think about Maru, and there's going to be different slates. You're going to have a clean slate, like a shark's fin. You're going to have rough edges, and you're trying to climb this mountain. Now, the challenge becomes, as you continually progress your career, well, what differentiates you? Mm-hmm. And I started to think about my career as a personal brand. Now, when I started doing that, I said, okay, well, how do I differentiate myself? So the first thing I thought about was get on different clients. And so you do that, but well, everyone can get on different clients. And so at the time I said, well, why don't I do an international rotation? I'm going to go live, work abroad for 2 years. Let's see how that goes. Now, that was an experience that it shaped the way I thought about leading international teams, even though I didn't have that scope at the time. And what happened was when you're US based and you're working with your partners across the pond, you always think about giving assignment leadership positions to people near you. And you don't think about the folks across the pond. So that really scaled the way I thought about that. So when I did ultimately lead international teams, I was very equitable when I thought about that. Now, when it came to industry, kind of coming back to this brand thing, getting pigeonholed in audit is really easy to do, but you have to understand what your objectives are. So if your objective is to become a partner, you have to do that. There was a point in time where I realized I went and differentiated myself. I did this international rotation, but that wasn't enough for me. When I came back, I actually was bored in audit. My rotation, I got to see 45 different transactions and industries and companies. And I come back to 2 clients. It didn't work. So there was this thirst for information, more knowledge, and I couldn't fulfill it. I couldn't satisfy it. And so at that point, it was like, okay, well, what's next? And that became the theme of the storyline of my career. What's next?
Yeah. And I think, one of the reasons why you and I have always gotten along so well is that we have this passion for understanding how other people work, how other people in other countries live, and bringing that global perspective. I tell, all of my, mentees and folks that are going through college even, go study abroad, live in another culture, see how other people live, walk in their shoes. And then similarly, working internationally and understanding global business. And while some folks can have a myopic view of like, wait, is that going to set you back? Really thinking about how that shapes your own identity, how that shapes your thought process, and how you can take that experience and apply it to the adaptability, example that you raised earlier. So I can definitely resonate, and I love that example.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when you left audit, you moved into oil field services in Houston. Oftentimes there's another stigma with, you were in audit. Now I already know kind of where your answer's going on this one. But leaving public accounting and moving into industry and you have that real world application of finance and accounting. Talk about that transition from public accounting to industry.
So the theme there is you go from validating to building. That's a humbling transition. Yeah. Because as an auditor, when you sit across this table, that file has information in it and you're validating it. But then when you switch that over and now you're on the other side, well, I started with a blank schedule. Now I have to fill all this stuff out. Yeah. And it was such a challenging endeavor. So when you start out, you're thinking, okay, well, what's my anchor point? And the anchor point in audit is, well, what's my prior year work papers look like? Mm-hmm. Of course. But you're in industry now, and the question came up, and the question is about your current quarter. Well, there's no prior year for that. Yeah. So now you're critically thinking, how do I solve this problem? And you're doing it with a lens of how would the auditor interpret what I'm providing? Would this be enough? Yeah. And so that part was actually helpful for me. Yeah. So on one side, it's humbling because you're going into this building phase from validating. The other side is I'm building this file, and I'm building this file with a lens of this is exactly what they're trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And so the back and forth was mediated quite a bit, but just making that initial transition, it was absolutely a challenge. And I think that was the draw for me. I knew it would be a challenge. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, what's next? Well, what's the next challenge? And this was absolutely one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Yeah. And I think, to your earlier point, it comes back to mindset, right? Even when your early years of audit, you were asking yourself, okay, I'm part of a large audit team, but how does my role fit into the bigger picture? And so that curiosity, that, the running towards the storm and chasing those new challenges and adventures. I mean, it's no surprise that you were able to translate that into that transition, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, so when you joined GE, remarkable, global brand that, is absolutely a household name, you leveraged your previous work experience in oil field services to get into GE. Talk about joining GE, leveraging that past experience, and then how you transition beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. GE at the time was going into oilfield services, which was that was the linchpin. So that was the
Yeah.
draw. Of course, they wanted the experience in house. I was going to work in their technical center of excellence in the headquarters in Fairfield, Connecticut. So we were going to move as a result of this role. The thing that actually caught my attention was I was going to also oversee the 8 industrial businesses, including oilfield services.
Mm-hmm.
So while that was the connection point to get me in, I was more focused on the other 7 industries that I didn't have a lot of experience in. And so you have this obsession with learning that you start to build on. And they gave me the ultimate learning platform, exposure to 7 additional industries that I didn't have exposure to before. The breadth of exposure was across this executive leadership team, the management training programs at Crotonville. It was an exceptional experience. I even ended up starting to do some of the trainings there myself, hosting them. It was such a wonderful organization. As you all know, you build leaders. Like leaders come from GE. It's such a great organization.
Yeah, and I loved, we talked about this in the prep call for the episode of finding that horizontal launching pad where you can leverage your expertise, but being part of an organization that allows you to be bigger than something like that. So it's like, yes, I can master this, but this mastery turns into greater opportunities, a larger world, which then kind of sets the stage for, the rest of your career. But before we jump into leaving GE, I mean, joining GE was clearly a career accelerator for you, right? And you now oversaw capabilities across several of these industrial businesses, including aviation and healthcare. So what did you learn and gain from being a part of GE that you didn't get from oil field services in just scaling these large, complex organizations?
And that's the point that's so unique here. And you touched on it, but the highlight is I was leading teams, and then I went to GE. And now I went from leading teams to influencing and leading leaders, right? So it was very unique. I became an individual contributor, overseeing 8 industrial businesses. And so the ability to learn how to influence effectively without formal authority. So that does 2 things for me. The first is it's going to hone those capabilities. I'm going to be really good at influencing. Otherwise, I won't get my way, and I'm still the last of 4 kids, so I won't. That's obviously important. And then the second thing is after the authority part of it, without having this formal authority, it changes the way you think about organizational designs. And so now when you start thinking about scaling, organizational designs are historically very hierarchical. But an effective one, when you start thinking about teams of teams, how would you build it internationally? How would you build it to where you have transaction velocity, decision-making velocity? That was one of the biggest takeaways for me. It was you go from this very bureaucratic construct to an empowerment and decision-making construct that improves velocity.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the training ground for how you've gone from industrials to semiconductors to tech platforms and now e-commerce. So talk a little bit about how your psychology has evolved as you navigate these moves across some very diverse sectors. And, not only just scaling the finance and accounting organization, but during these transitions, you're joining large companies, established companies. Some are running still like startups, but then you also have this, advent of technology and AI that is, improving and becoming, a buzzword that we use in our everyday lives, that we use in work, that we invest hundreds of billions of dollars into on a, seems like a quarterly basis. And so, talk about how that psychology evolved over all of these changing factors.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the beauty of it. You want to have this industrial agility, and now you have to blend it with tech leverage. You have to be very focused on understanding technology. So now I even lead finance IT. So finance systems, rolls into me, and it's an important aspect because if you think about the data that we leverage, everything that we do comes back to data and information.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really important. And so when you start jumping across industries, the beauty of it for me is once I go into it saying, I have this really unique playbook. And the next day I say, it's a really good playbook. I just don't know if it's for this organization yet.
Mm.
And so for the first 90 days, I'm listening, I'm understanding, I'm gaining a new baseline of what are the goals? What are the objectives? How can I now take my team and create organizational value? And so once we get that objective out and we say, okay, we're going to create organizational value this way and this way, then I say, well, actually, one of the things that I did at this organization, we could probably deploy that. And maybe we can use this play from
You're
this
cherry picking. Yeah.
And so now you build this customized, cherry-picked game plan that you're deploying with your team. And that's the biggest thing for me, because if you go in with an already deployed plan, you don't know the problem statement. So you have to listen. Listening is a critically important aspect.
Well, I can't help but, hear you talking about a playbook for scaling finance teams. And as fathers, I'm like, okay, why isn't this playbook work for each of my kids? It's, each time you're like, okay, let me cherry pick this that worked previously. This is going out the window because that's not going to work with this kid. So there's a lot of analogies that we have between work and life that, adaptability, once again, becomes very important.
It always.
When, we've talked a little bit about the growing importance and the role of AI in accounting and finance. This is more of, I guess, a philosophical view as well as a practical view. How do you think AI will reshape the finance function over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, the phrase that I'm using is I view it as elevation, not elimination. And the way I'm thinking about that is AI is going to fundamentally reshape transaction-heavy processes, fundamentally.
Yeah.
And if you take that with clean data bills, unique technical architecture, so where your transactions can go from start to finish without being touched or interacted with, so they're touchless effectively. And so what this can turn itself into is a recon should be virtual and be completely touchless. Journal entries are a consequence of something not working properly, so they can be effectively eliminated. So now what happens to the finance and accounting teams? They're now going to become analytical, more analytical, and focusing on looking around corners, identifying potential problems and solutions well before they're occurring. And I think the winners in all of this, it's going to be the team members who start to pair and merge this technical depth that they're going to have just from studying and from experiences with data fluency and business judgment.
And do you think, let's say we can use AI and we automate 70% of a traditional senior accountant's role so that now they can go deep on the 30% and think about, other ways to think critically, other, problem solving. It comes back to how are we forcing people to think? I want to juxtapose that with, the big four have come out and said, we're going to hire fewer college grads. We're going to, try and grow from within. But if you kill the recruiting source and the top of the funnel, are we effectively, reducing the amount of folks that enter the accounting profession? Where are they getting their training is my question.
That's right. I think it's going to be twofold. I think having the big four do that, from my perspective, where I sit today at Chewy, it's actually very helpful because now we're able to compete on campuses. We
Yeah.
were not able to compete before.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now, the way we're doing that is we're building a rotation program. That rotation program is emulating what the Big Four provides to you. You're going from one segment to another part of the business, and you're learning the business. And then at the end, you're deciding where you're going to land next, right? So that was one of the aspects of it. Now, the other aspect is they're reducing it for, in my opinion, two reasons. One, they won't need the same labor force because they're going to use tools. You'll recall this. They're taking all the journal entries anyway, and they're putting them into a platform. The platform's then saying, here are the anomalies or the potential anomalies. So that analysis, they're elevating the team members that they're going to have in-house. That elevation is going to say, okay, now I need different types of analytical people. And the corporate industries and the corporate teams, I believe, is going to take the remainder of that incoming group. And we're just going to be challenged with how are we going to train them effectively. The Big Four is a massive training ground. They're very effective. We're going to need to step up and compete effectively too.
Yeah, and I was going to say we'll see you at Career Day on campus, because I think Connor Group saw it as an opportunity too. I think the psychology shifted from, to your point, for both of us. The Big Four was such a great training ground in audit in those early foundational years of shaping our career, shaping our fundamental understanding of business and accounting. But if that kind of goes out the window, maybe they're learning at Chewy. Maybe they're getting their hands dirty working on an audit. Or sorry, not on an audit, but on an IPO at Connor Group. And so I think those opportunities, to your point, will reinvent themselves versus, okay, accountants are going to turn into robots and this is going to turn into the Jetsons, right?
No, not quite. And you're exactly right, because before we could only compete at year 3. We couldn't touch.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
Give me 2 busy seasons and then you're frustrated. Let me come in and save you.
Or start your accounting career when in the first year of SOX, and then they tell you that there's a busy season. I'm like, wait, when does busy season end? Because this seems to go on for 12 months, right?
That's right.
So we've known each other for a long time now. We've had the pleasure of working together across 3 companies. Can you give our audience a window into how Connor Group support has evolved, at each of those companies during those periods of high growth and transformation?
It's absolute thought leadership and thought partnership. Because as you talk about that, each of these situations were completely different.
Yeah.
Right. So on one hand, it was IPO readiness, IPO, post-IPO stabilization. On another vector, it was challenging control environment, navigating through control challenges, working through building up that program and understanding how to get a clean bill of health, if you will.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the other side of it was transformational support, because this journey, this is pre-AI effectively. This journey has always been there. How do you get systems to perform more effectively? How do you do more automation? How do you leverage workflow planning tools and applications to create time for team members? So we've been on this journey about creating time for team members for a really long time.
Yeah.
And Connor Group's partnership with me as we come up with these really, really wide-ranging ideas has been invaluable. And literally across 3 different organizations at 3 different spans of its life cycle. And that I expect to continue. Obviously, AI is the next life cycle that we're going to dive into after we get some of these foundations.
A call's already being set up, Will. Now I'm excited to have that discussion. And to your point, I think, being at Connor Group, it's crazy to say, for 12 years, I've seen the evolution too, right? In my early years at the firm, if Connor Group was at a client, the accounting and finance department would start buzzing around going, hey, I think we're going public, the ones that weren't in the know, right? And so to evolve that to, yes, we can support pre-IPO companies. Yes, we can support public companies at massive scale that are, trying to get their SOX programs working, effectively and efficiently. And then, in your current role, having the opportunity to take a very successful and thriving public company and actually think about optimization and thinking ahead where we can shape the roadmap, so to speak.
That's right.
It's fun. I love when you go to fun companies and we get to work together.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Got to find joy in it.
Exactly. So speaking of transitions, you went from semiconductors to pet products. And I think I've said it and I've gone on record that I think I get a Chewy box delivered at my house on a daily basis. And I tell my wife, honey, are you sure we have the subscription settings set up properly? But I'm doing my part to help you hit those earnings numbers. But how does that transition take place going from tech to consumer?
Yeah, it's as you know, on paper, semiconductors and pet products couldn't be more different. But when you step back from it, and it's about scaling finance and accounting teams, building governance, supporting growth through this leadership principle, and now, of course, focusing on this journey of clean data foundations, jumping into AI and other things. It's one of those things where it transfers. I still have the capability of just constantly being curious and being obsessed with learning. Now I'm in an e-com organization. I've never done e-com before, so this is a first, which is always something that's exciting. Mm-hmm. And Chewy's a mission-driven brand with deep, deep customer loyalty. And I just saw this opportunity to effectively leverage my playbook and see where I could create value as well and support the mission.
Yeah. And also now you can basically say, what can't I do? Right? Yes. What company can't I join? You've ticked all the boxes to where, you are Mr. Versatility.
That's right.
Yeah. No, I think, a fascinating part of your story, and once again, we talked about this previously, I speak with a lot of executives now that are thinking about, maybe they've been in their careers for 25, 30 years, and they're thinking about board service, right? Yep. There, once again, used to be a stigma that, okay, well, I'll be in an executive role and then, I'll sit on a few boards in retirement and that'll keep me engaged and other things. I think that psychology has shifted and, you're evidence of that, right? You've joined 2 public company boards while still operating in senior finance roles. First and foremost, what motivated you to pursue board service at this stage in your career? And then, let's start with that question. What kind of drove that?
Yeah, it was a goal. So I set goals, and I set these really ambitious goals, and I had tremendous support from the leadership team. This is when I was at Global Foundries. And when you have these ambitious goals and you have tremendous support, that tends to create this really amplified opportunity. And so when I said, I think this is a possibility for me, why did I want it though? I wanted it because I still have this idea that my profile should look a certain way. Mm-hmm. Board is on there, and it was one of my next gating items. So I said, okay, I want to be on a public company board. The emphasis was on A. The second one came by luck and by privilege. It was a complete surprise to me, candidly. But their support was such that we had a recruiting firm. I went through that process and went through the interviews, and some of them they meld together, and it just seemed like a really good fit. And it has been for the last, plus 12 months. I can bring this pattern recognition from IPOs, restructuring, scaling, and all these different industries into my board capability as well. And so if you think about the boards that I'm on, sugar refining company at Sucro, to an autonomous security robot organization in the United States. This agility doesn't change.
Just keep ticking those boxes, Will. No, that's amazing. And this, we like to inform, our audience members too. So for those executives that are thinking about, board service, How does that process even take shape? Like,
Yeah.
tell us about organizations that helped you pursue that. Obviously,
Yeah.
getting the internal sponsorship from Global
That's right.
Foundries was a huge benefit as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The recruiting firm that they sponsored for me was tremendous. They went through this interview process and created a board bio for me. Now, the
Yeah,
unique thing about that is your board bio is going to be twofold. One on the business side of things that you have done over your career and where you could create value for an organization. But then the second is on the personal front. So it has this nice blend of everything that you are as a person and that you would bring as a board member. And so you need to have a clear value prop. In my
hmm
case, it was IPO experience, governance discipline, scaling global finance functions, having the audit background. So, of course, I'm AC chair for both of these organizations. And so that was something that was helpful for me. And then the other thing is whoever's interested in doing this, if they're still sitting in an active role, you have to be ready when the opportunity appears. Because once it's time and you get the opportunity to do it, you're going to do it and you're going to want
yeah,
to do it really, really well. But now you're adding a second job to the jobs you already have.
yeah.
In the case, a third job to the jobs you already have. And so it's now you get back to where am I going to find this time? The standard is the standard. So you
Yeah.
know you want to perform, you're going to perform. And it's about creating these efficiencies across all aspects of what you're doing.
Yeah, and we talk about mentorship a lot on
Yes.
the podcast and in previous episodes. Did you have board members that you could ask questions of as you were kind of navigating this journey, for the first time, where you knew, hey, how much should I ask for on the compensation side? How do I present myself to make sure that I'm being evaluated in the right light? Talk a little bit about
I
any role
did.
models
I
you had.
did. Yeah, mostly on the second point. The second
Mm,
point was how do I show up? Because what I was struggling with was I'm an operator. I'm a
yeah.
builder. I am used to having teams do it, working side by side. Well, how do I step back and become a board member?
Yeah.
And those were a lot of the conversations. It was about understanding eyes in, hands out. And how do I do that effectively? And so you could think about it. The analogy I would use is there are times to be on the accelerator, and then there's times for me to be a passenger
Yeah.
in the vehicle. And I
Yeah.
had to learn how to be a passenger because not only was I on the accelerator and I wanted the steering wheel, but I also wanted to plug in the GPS. I wanted to make sure I knew the directions. There was a lot that I wanted in my normal roles,
Yeah.
but it doesn't work that way with a board role. And it's advisory, it's consultation, and it's giving a perspective. And it's not always giving the answer or getting the
Yeah.
answer, right? It's about those things helping the management team actually reach their conclusions. And so that was a massive change for me. And so there were a number of conversations and text messages like, hey, am I thinking about this the right way or am I still coming off as an operator?
Yeah, no, and remembering which hat you're wearing, right?
That's
And that's the dual threat, or having the dual roles of, board and operator. Did you find yourself
right.
kind of chomping at the bit and then almost forcing yourself to, sit back and, oh wait, this isn't my company. I'm, in a governance role. I'm not, doing, I'm leading.
That's right. That's right. I may or may not have asked for a couple of white papers. I may or may not have, but
No.
it was a challenge. It was a challenge, but it was one that I was very aware of,
Yeah.
and that awareness really helps because you're going into it and you look at something and you're saying to yourself, "Well, I would have done it this way."
Yeah.
But if we're taking different routes and we're getting to the same destination, that actually works for me. And
Yeah.
that was one of the capabilities I started to gain. It didn't have to be this specified route as long as we still reach the same destination.
Yeah, at Connor Group, we call it letting someone or riding someone else's crazy train, right?
There you go.
You know where the destination is, but
That's right.
sometimes there might be some twists and turns
That's right.
and hopefully
That's right.
some cliffs that get jumped in the process,
That's right.
but ride their
Exactly.
crazy train and get them to the destination, right?
That's where you can find the joy.
So when I definitely hear you on shifting your mindset from operator to board member.
Yep.
Now you're still a finance executive, so you have to then switch back from I'm in a governance role to I lead finance teams and I'm an executive. So how does your board service then inform how you now function as an operator?
Yeah, it's actually been a really unique change to my leadership style.
Yeah.
Because as you become less of an operator, you focus on two things. The first is you start building highly functioning teams. You build high performing teams.
Mm-hmm.
Like my teams are very, very capable, and that's something I'm extremely proud of. The second thing you do is because you built these really high functioning teams, you provide the strategic guidance and you give them the road and you let them run.
Yeah.
So just by doing those two things, I can tell you my team appreciates the autonomy they have and the ability to make decisions. One funny story, and it's a small decision, but it emphasizes what can occur. We'd hired a couple of team members, and we have these benches on the floor where all the team members sit together. Mm-hmm. And I have an office, but I also have a bench seat because I like to spend time with my team as well. And so we're doing our monthly birthdays, and I go out there and I'm about to sit at my bench seat, and I look and I don't see my name tag. I'm like, well, what happened? And so then I figure it all out, and I go to the person who did it. It's like, yeah, we hired new people. The team member they were working with sits right next to you, so we kicked you out. Right.
Was it that? And that wasn't a career limiting move, right?
It wasn't. And when you think about that, right, to just say we are structured and designed to make decisions, including ones that affect our leader. Yeah, it was absolutely the right decision. So of course I made some fun of it. So I had this eviction notice printed out, and I was evicting myself, and I wrote it all out, and I signed it by the person who evicted me. And I found another home, which is great. I was really thankful for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the role of being a servant leader, right? Like
exactly.
we lead to serve.
That's right.
I threw an executive dinner in New York last year, and there was some snafu with the registrations to where we were actually oversubscribed by 25%, and so I made the joke of I don't even have a seat at my own dinner that I'm hosting and paying for, and I felt bad. I took a chair that I was blocking the fire exit with, and I kept getting yelled at by the wait staff, and I'm like. My guests they felt so bad. They're like, I'm not going to eat this. Do you want some? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, now I'm getting scraps at my own dinner.
That's right.
It was.
That's right. You just sit there with a glass and go from there.
Exactly. We lead by example, and then I got a couple of slices of New York style pizza after the event. It was perfect.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Will, you already touched on this a little bit of, you took on the board service on top of a job, on top of another job, on top of being a parent and a spouse and everything else. Well, you also then midway through your career decided, you know what? I think I need another 3 letters after my name. So I'm going to go back and get my MBA. Yes. What motivated that decision? And, tell the story about the conversation with your family, including a little essay.
That's such a funny story. Such a funny story. I'll start with why did I want an MBA? So there were 2 real things there. The first was I wanted to sharpen my strategic lens beyond accounting. That was the premise. I wanted to be viewed as a business leader with the business acumen. I wanted some letters to support that, of course. And then when I wanted to actually go into B school, I said, okay, well, since we are going back to school, I'm going to need some help on this journey. And so I'll never forget this conversation. I go and I talk to my wife, and my mother-in-law is there at the same time. I'll say, hey, I just want to see if you guys are okay with this, but I'm considering going back to school. So we are going back to school. Like, what? I'm like, yeah. Matter of fact, I need your help with my essay. So I'm going to give it to you. Feel free to give me comments and feedback on it. Right. And so the next day at work, I go in and I write this essay as fast as I possibly can to make sure I have grammatical errors and everything that I should have in it that makes it a really, really rough draft present. And so I send it to them and they're completely chopping up the entire essay. Like, it is one of the worst essays they've ever seen. They're giving me all this feedback on it. And then before you knew it, they were so locked in this journey that I accepted a lot of their feedback, a lot of their input. And I said, well, now that I've been accepted, we are all going back to school. So I appreciate your help.
Oh man, I love that. My kids tell me sometimes they listen to my podcast, and now I'm waiting for the day where they come to come to me with their homework and be like, "Dad, we are going to school," and I'm like, "We are not. I am finished with school. You are going to school."
That's right. Oh, that's right. I can tell you now, middle school math is not what it used to be. I can tell you
I know. I'm like, I did fine in middle school math. Let's see how you do.
That's right. Exactly.
No, that was amazing, and I know the sacrifice of you're going back to school on the weekends, on top of working full time, on top of the board service, on top of everything else.
And it's one of those things, Robbie. It just reinforces that growth doesn't stop mid-career. If anything, it's when it matters most. I was able to go into a case study, listen to it, go into a lecture, and we can talk about things we would want to try and see how it reacted in real life. And I can actually deploy it at work. And come back and give that feedback. That was priceless.
Yeah, talk about real-time feedback, right? In terms of, yes, I tried this and it worked.
Exactly.
Well, and I think the other great example is, having been 15 years into your career at the point in time when you go back to your MBA, your classmates, your professors are actually better off with you having that experience, because you're not only bringing real world experience from your current roles, you're bringing all of that experience from the other places you've lived, from the other roles that you've held. And, sometimes this is a message to, the next generation of executives of, don't feel the rush to go immediately from undergrad into getting your MBA when you don't have that real world practical experience, because it's actually so much more enriching. It's not always just about when you get those letters after your name. It's, what did you learn from getting those letters after your name? That's one of the reasons why I passed level 1 of the CFA. And then I said, you know what? I'm not going into portfolio management or valuations, so I will not be sitting for levels 2 and 3. So exactly. You got to do it for the right reasons. And no, I think that was amazing.
Absolutely.
We talked a bit about all of the places that you've lived, and you've relocated multiple times throughout your career. We've got Houston, London, Connecticut, San Francisco, now South Florida. How have those moves shaped, not only how you lead, but then, you are not just moving, we are moving. You're taking your family with you. So how did that then translate into family life, into, being a husband and a father?
Yeah. You need support. And without my wife's support, without the broader family support, none of it would be possible. If you think about, I ended up commuting to San Francisco on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Just imagine the strain that can put on a family, right? Mm-hmm. But we had such good support, and everyone was so supportive. Even the kids were supportive because we explained it to them. I gave them a math exercise. I said, look, when you have variables, I'm trying to minimize the number of variables that will be negatively impacted by this move. Yeah. If I relocate everyone, then every single variable is impacted. Mm-hmm. But by doing this, I'm isolating one variable. Even though it impacts all of us, the one variable will be me that'll be on a plane every week. Mm. But I won't miss any games. I'll be here every weekend that I can be. And when I'm not here, you guys can come there.
Yeah.
It changed how I showed up when I showed up. And what I mean by that is when I'm working and then I go home, there's a process for that transition to occur.
Oh, yeah.
The first couple of hours, I'm probably home, but I'm not home.
Yeah.
Except for when this occurred. As soon as I get off that plane, I'm at home and I'm there 100%. And I'm completely locked in. And it gave me this unique intentionality of being 100% where I was.
Yeah.
Because time became so valuable. It was my most valuable commodity. And I didn't have enough of it.
Yeah, no, and it's always hard, sometimes when you have those conversations with your kids, and they're like, "Well, Dad, you're working all the time, and and I'm at school during the day, and then you're working when I get home, and we only get a little bit of time, in the evenings or at sporting events, and so it's tough when they don't always receive or understand that, well, actually you're working to support the family, and we get to do all of the things that we're able to do as a result of sacrifices. We all make sacrifices, right?
That's right. That's right.
Well, you touched a little bit on, I think this covers a little bit of this next question, which is, these leadership journeys are never linear, right? And sometimes you make some of your best professional breakthroughs during periods of adversity that you have to navigate. For you personally, well, I guess let's start professionally. What was probably the most challenging situation you've had to navigate in your career?
The pandemic while working at Airbnb. That was a defining leadership moment. As you'll recall, unicorn, going to go public, everything's being scaled. You guys were supporting, of course, with our group. We're getting ready to have this public launch. And then the pandemic hit. And now we're all remote. So we went from being in office to being remote to Airbnb at the time potentially losing everything.
Yeah.
Because the world shut down.
Yeah.
Now, the hardest part of it was, how do you lead through that type of challenge? Now we're on Zoom, we're not in person. And to accommodate the challenges that were occurring financially, we're also going to do a reduction in force of 25%.
Yeah.
Which was also challenging. And it was very well publicized because we put together this pitch book effectively of all our impacted team members, and was launched on LinkedIn and everywhere else that we could to help them land on their feet at another role. When you navigate those kind of difficult times with your team, the empathy, everything that you learn from it, it molds the way you lead on a continual basis. Yeah. Every moment that we're here and I'm working and I'm leading a team, there's probably not a week that goes by when I don't think about some of those times. It tests your culture. When you go through crises like that, it tests your personal culture as well as the culture you create amongst your team.
Yeah, no, and I've had the pleasure of working closely with the team members that report to you in each of these roles, including at Airbnb. And I almost feel like I should have these quotes and testimonials popping up on the screen of just all of the complimentary things that I've heard about folks that have worked for you and your leadership style and how they felt represented. I mean, obviously with the pandemic and Airbnb, sometimes you have to make some really difficult decisions in order to save an entire company. And to do that with grace and with just humility, I think is a testament to your leadership style.
No, I appreciate that. And the lasting point, and I don't think a lot of people connect these things together, you can have clarity and empathy. And they can coexist. You can have both. Yeah, they can coexist.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was on the professional side. I know you and I tend to catch up regularly, but then I realized that there was this brief period where I hadn't reached out or we hadn't touched base. And next time we talked, I hear about this, personal story of, this,
Yeah.
this terrible back injury that you went
Yeah.
through. And,
Yeah.
you and I are wired very similarly. Our,
Yeah.
our health and activity and exercise shapes how we show up every day for our families, for work and everything. Talk a little bit about, that period. And, like I said, I appreciate you, sharing some personal moments, because I think, your story of how you got through it will help others get through it. Right.
No, absolutely. I'm happy to share it because it was an absolute journey and it's still a great journey to be on. So I'll give a little bit of the backstory. So it's July of 25, and I'm starting to have left knee challenges. The left knee keeps buckling and it's giving out occasionally. So I go see an orthopedic. I go to this orthopedic and he said, well, your knee is structurally sound. So why don't we look at your lower back? So we look at the lower back and like, okay, well, you have compression on your nerve. And that compression is causing this left leg weakness. Because what ends up happening is the left leg would spasm out to the point where I would have a signal in my brain that says the left leg's not there. Boom, you collapse. You could fall.
Yeah.
Spontaneously, you could fall. And so we have a plan. We're like, okay, we're going to go in and we're going to do what's called a laminectomy to go in and shave the vertebrae to alleviate the pressure off the spinal cord.
Yeah.
And so we do that in September. And a couple of weeks later, I'm expecting to have this incremental increase.
Yeah.
But it was a blip and then it stabilized back to where it was before.
Right.
And so for this entire duration, I'm using crutches as a support system to make sure that I don't fall just randomly.
Exactly.
And so now you go a couple of months after that, and now we're in November, and I was like, look, something's not right. I'm talking to my neurologist, and he's like, well, we need to do another nerve conduction study. So a nerve conduction study effectively shows, they run these tests, and it shows what signals are coming from where in your spinal cord. And so we do it, and this neurologist says, I think the problem's higher up in your spine. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. I thought we solved this lumbar thing and it was a matter of time. No, we think it's further up. So he actually admits me to the hospital. He says, I want us to get to the bottom of it. I hate to do this to you, but we have to admit you. So I did what any logical person who's being admitted on a Friday would do. So I go to Chick-fil-A and I get some food. And then I go admit myself, right? So I was not going there hungry.
Yeah.
I refused to go there hungry. So I go to Chick-fil-A and I enjoy my meal, right? And then I go there and we're able to do the MRI the next morning and they see an enhancement on the spine. And an enhancement just shows up as this really glaring spot, but you don't know what it is. And so we're saying, okay, well, you're going to go into surgery next Wednesday. We just don't know what surgery it'll be. And I'm thinking,
oh, that's reassuring.
This is amazing. I feel great now, feeling super calm.
Exactly.
No nerves whatsoever. There's no anxiety with that phrase at all.
That Chick-fil-A was real good. Yeah.
Right. So then we do an exploratory on Tuesday. And the Tuesday exploratory was an angiogram to ensure it wasn't something dealing with the artery connecting to the vein. So we had to rule that out. So that was on Tuesday. Came back clean. So I'm like, okay, we're going into the surgery the next day. And so then Wednesday comes and now I'm going in. And once I come to and they explain everything to me, they found a herniated disc. They found compression. They cleaned everything up. And I was actually on the right road now, right? So before I was on the road to recovery with zero visibility. After that surgery, which was in November, I was on the road with visibility and I could actually see it. And it was great because even while I was still in the hospital through the recovery phase, I would get up and they would help me walk and start moving. And just being able to do that was something that it felt so distant.
Yeah.
Because from August beyond, it was one of these things that just became this massive challenge for me. And as you know, Robbie, I'm in the gym 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a choice. It was part of my requirements.
Yeah.
Right. Like working out was a requirement. It wasn't an option. Like if I were traveling for work, the first picture we would look at is the gym picture.
Yeah.
It's that's the only one that mattered.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
That was the most important thing. So to lose that, I had to find some type of replacement. I'm thankful I have a 10-year-old at home who is a bit of a geek. So we have some VR headsets at home. I continue to do the VR headset. There's a workout on there. It's the application's called FitXR. So I continue to do that. I do it to this day. I got to a 47-week schedule at this point. I had a very, very consistent thing. I'm really thankful for that, because otherwise I probably would have lost it. Candidly, I probably would have lost it. But yeah, it's been a journey. And what did I take from it? Resilience, gratitude, every day matters. These things, like something simple like walking.
Yeah.
I've always expected it.
Yeah.
And I never expected to lose it. Right. So I learned a lot. It was really humbling experience.
No, and you said one thing when we did connect after, this was almost in the rearview mirror. You said, I would have done anything, right? It didn't matter the risk. I needed this, and I need that as part of my identity. And so, I think people think it goes back to the needs and the wants. I think we have a pretty good grasp of what our needs are in order to, know who we are as people and as leaders and everything. Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, Will, we're coming to the end of our time. I mean, I've been absolutely fascinated by this conversation, even learned things that I can't believe I didn't already know about you, which is amazing. I finish my episodes with one question to all of my guests, which is, success requires trade-offs and sacrifices. If you have the opportunity to, crystal ball or time machine, go back into the past and redo anything, would you do things differently, or would you do things exactly the same?
Yeah. I would have invested earlier in sponsorship and long-term mentors. Now I spend a lot of time being a mentor because of the gap I felt I had earlier in my career. Because when I thought about my career early on, I thought about capability equals X. And X could be success, the promotion, the next progression within my career. And I had capability as the direct linkage to that.
Yeah.
The part that was missing was the relationships. Capability plus relationships equals X. That was the part that I didn't gather that and focus on that until much later on. I would have absolutely invested in that a lot earlier. That's something that I think would have helped me navigate situations and make decisions probably differently. That's something I would have done. That's something I definitely would have done differently.
Yeah, it's interesting. That is one of the more thoughtful answers that I've heard on that question. And it, immediately, I think in my mind of the mentors that I had and the people I wish I had access to early on in my career, the folks that, you did turn to. Well, what if you had turned to others that thought bigger, that had different answers? Those are, incredible attributes. My son gave me a hug.
Fantastic.
Do the 3-second pause. Those are the, really the game changers of if you put in the same work ethic, you put in the same mindset, but you just had a different landscape to work with. Having someone that can make you think bigger than you ever could in your wildest dreams and sort of even show you the ropes. So I would empathize and agree with that 100%, man.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a true pleasure. I really am thankful for your time. I'm thankful for your partnership. I'm thankful for your friendship. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Robbie. It's always good to see you.